When Peter showed me that text, I laughed. Not because it was funny, nothing about it was, but because it was so perfectly Victor. Always smug. Always certain that no matter what I did, he'd already thought 10 steps ahead. But after Peter left that night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at those words until they blurred. Lines in the sand wash away with the tide. He wasn't just mocking us. He was promising me that my new boundaries wouldn't last. And the worst part? Some piece of me believed him. The next morning, Anna marched into the workshop with a clipboard in hand. "If he thinks he can scare us with poetry," she said briskly, "then he hasn't met me on a mission. We're tightening the watch schedule. No gaps, no excuses." She passed me the sheet, filled with names and times. Our little circle of neighbors and friends had grown overnight. People volunteered shifts to walk past the workshop, to keep eyes on the street, to be our lookouts. It should have comforted me. Instead, I felt exposed. The more people who knew we needed watching, the more likely word would spread back to him. Peter joined us mid-morning, Timothy trailing behind him with his backpack. "School called," Peter explained. Timothy wasn't feeling well, so I picked him up. Timothy flopped into one of the workshop chairs, pale and quiet. I fussed over him, but he shook his head. "Just a stomach ache," he mumbled. Anna eyed me knowingly. "Stress," she whispered when Timothy wasn't listening. "He feels it, Lois." I hated that she was right. My son had already lived through Andrew's temper, and now he was soaking in my fear of Victor. What kind of life was that for a child? By late afternoon, Peter went to check the back door, the one Victor had slipped through before. That's when he found it. A second spool of thread. This one white, balanced perfectly on the doorframe, like a taunt. He carried it inside, his expression grim. He's telling us he can still get close. Anytime he wants. My stomach dropped. If the black spool was an insult, the white one felt like a joke. A reminder that even with our watch, with our new plan, we weren't untouchable. Anna slammed her fist on the table. "Then we fight harder. He wants to test us? Fine. Let him see what happens when we don't break." Her fire kept me steady, but when Peter left that night, I noticed the way he lingered at the edge of the street, scanning every shadow before getting into his truck. Even his confidence had cracks now. And me? I pretended to sleep when Timothy curled against me, but the truth was, I lay awake listening for sounds that weren't there. Every passing car made me flinch. Every groan of the old house sent my heart racing. The cracks weren't just around me. They were inside me. 2 nights later, the cracks widened. Timothy had finally drifted off, and I was dozing on the couch when I heard a tap at the window. Soft. Almost playful. I froze. Then another tap. And another. Slowly, I forced myself to look. There was no face in the glass. No figure in the yard. Only a tiny object stuck to the outside of the window with tape. I crept closer, my breath shallow. It was a Polaroid. Of me. Taken from the sidewalk earlier that day, while I had been standing in the workshop doorway talking to Anna. I yanked the photo down, my hands trembling. On the back, in neat block letters, someone had written, "Sand washes. Stone remains." I sat on the couch for hours with that Polaroid in my lap, the words on the back burning into me. Sand washes. Stone remains. It wasn't just another taunt. It was a declaration. He wasn't just saying my boundaries would crumble. He was telling me that he was the stone. Permanent. Immovable. Always there. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, my body felt numb. Timothy padded out of his room, rubbing his eyes. I shoved the photo under the cushion before he could see it. My son didn't need more shadows in his world. But hiding it didn't erase the truth. Victor had been at my window, close enough to see me through the glass. Anna was furious when I showed her later that morning. "This isn't intimidation anymore, Lois," she snapped. "This is escalation. He's circling you like a wolf." Peter's face was tighter. Quieter. He turned the photo over in his hands. "He's testing limits. He wants to see how far he can go before you break." I swallowed hard. So what do I do? Pack up and run again? Leave everything I've built here? "No," Peter said firmly. His voice cut through the fear like steel. "If you run now, you'll be running for the rest of your life." His conviction steadied me, but only a little. That night, I double-checked every lock, every curtain, every shadow. Timothy fell asleep clutching his stuffed rabbit. I stayed awake, ears tuned to the silence. And then, a scrape. Faint, against the back door. My breath caught. The scrape came again, like metal against wood. I tiptoed into the kitchen, heart hammering so hard I thought it would give me away. Through the thin curtain, I saw it, the silhouette of a man, crouched low at the door. I froze. Another scrape. This time I recognized it, metal against the lock. He was trying to pick it. For one wild second, I wanted to fling the door open, scream in his face, dare him to come inside. But my hands shook too badly. Timothy was asleep in the next room. So instead, I grabbed the phone and dialed Peter. He answered on the second ring, voice rough with sleep. "Lois." "He's here," I whispered. At the door. I heard him curse under his breath. "Stay quiet. Don't move. I'm on my way." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the scrape of metal. It stopped suddenly. The shadows straightened. For a heartbeat, I thought he might leave. Relief surged, until he stepped closer to the window and pressed something against the glass. Another Polaroid. This one of Timothy. I clapped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. He must have taken it at the schoolyard. My baby. Red rage rushed through me, stronger than fear. I didn't care about spools or sand or stones anymore. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. Headlights swept across the street outside. Peter's truck. The shadow vanished into the trees like smoke. Peter burst through the front door seconds later, his eyes blazing. "Where is he?" "Gone," I choked out, holding up the photo with trembling hands. "But look what he left." Peter's jaw locked so hard I could see the muscle twitch. He pulled me into his arms, crushing the photo between us. "He won't touch Timothy. I swear it, Lois. Not while I'm breathing." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew this wasn't the end of Victor's game. It was only the beginning. By morning, I was running on fumes. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that Polaroid of Timothy staring back at me. I kept asking myself the same question on a loop. What if Peter hadn't come? Peter didn't give me the luxury of sitting with those thoughts. "We're going to the police," he said firmly over coffee. "This isn't just harassment anymore. This is criminal." I wanted to argue, to say Victor would wriggle out of it, the way men like him always did. But then I looked at Timothy, pale and silent, spooning cereal into his mouth without even tasting it. And I realized, if I stayed silent now, I'd be complicit in letting Victor control our lives. So I nodded. "Okay, let's go." Anna insisted on coming, marching in with her purse already on her shoulder. "You need a witness," she declared. "And someone who won't let the police brush this off." At the station, the smell of burnt coffee and floor polish hit me the moment we walked in. A young officer at the desk looked up with polite disinterest. "Can I help you?" Peter stepped forward. "We need to file a report." "Harassment. Attempted break-in." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof?" I pulled the Polaroid from my bag and slid it across the desk. His eyes flicked down, then back up, a trace of unease creeping into his expression. "Where did you get this?" "He taped it to my window," I said, my voice trembling. "After trying to break into my house." He cleared his throat and disappeared into the back. Minutes later, a detective emerged. Gray suit, thinning hair, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm Detective Harris. Let's talk in my office." Inside, I recounted everything. The spools of thread. The first Polaroid. The break-in attempt. The picture of Timothy. My voice shook, but I forced myself to keep going because if I stopped, I might never start again. Harris listened, nodding occasionally, jotting notes. When I finally finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Do you know who this man is?" "Victor, what's his last name?" "Victor Hill," Peter answered. His tone was clipped, controlled, but I knew him well enough to hear the rage simmering beneath. At the mention of the name, something flickered in Harris's eyes. Recognition. "You know him," Anna said sharply. Harris hesitated a beat too long. "I know of him." He's connected. Knows the right people. Slippery, legally speaking. But this, he tapped the Polaroid. This is strong evidence. Especially involving your child. So you'll do something? I asked, hope threading through my fear. We'll open an investigation, he said carefully. I'll assign a patrol to keep an eye on your street. And if he shows up again, call us immediately. It wasn't the ironclad protection I wanted, but it was something. I clung to that word, investigation, like a lifeline. When we left the station, Anna muttered, connected. Slippery. Did you hear him? They're already bracing for excuses. Peter placed a hand on my shoulder. Don't listen to that. At least now he knows we're not hiding. That changes the game. I wanted to believe him. For Timothy's sake, I had to. That night, a patrol car cruised slowly past the house. The sight should have comforted me. Instead, it made my skin crawl. Because if Victor was watching, and I knew he was, then he'd see it too. And he'd know I'd drawn another line. Around midnight, I heard a knock at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. I almost didn't answer, but then I saw the uniform through the peephole. It was Officer Green, the young man from the desk. He gave me a polite nod. Just doing a check. Everything quiet here. I forced a smile. Yes. Thank you. He tipped his hat and left. But as his car pulled away, I noticed something in the flower bed beneath the window. A small square of white, half buried in the soil. I bent down, my hands trembling, and pulled it free. Another Polaroid. Not of me this time. Not of Timothy. Of the patrol car. The timestamp in the corner showed it had been taken less than 10 minutes earlier. I stared at that Polaroid of the patrol car until my vision blurred. The timestamp mocked me. 10 minutes earlier. He had been there, watching not just me, but the very people sent to protect me. It wasn't just a warning. It was proof. Proof that he could slip through cracks no badge or siren could stop. By morning, word had spread. That's the thing about small towns. News doesn't trickle. It floods. By the time I went to buy groceries, I could feel the eyes on me. Some pitying, some curious, and some wary. Mrs. Calloway, the baker who'd once slipped Timothy extra cookies, avoided me completely, turning down another aisle. A man I barely knew muttered, should have stayed out of it, as he passed. It hit me then. This wasn't just my fight anymore. My presence here was pulling the town into a spotlight most of them clearly didn't want. Back at the workshop, Anna slammed her hands on the counter. Cowards, she fumed. They'd rather whisper behind your back than stand up to him. Peter, however, was quieter. It's not that simple, he said. Victor's had his hooks in this place for years. Favors, debts, handshakes in the dark. Some folks don't just fear him, they owe him. The weight of that sank in like a stone. It explained the sideways glances, the sudden coldness from people I thought were friends. Even Detective Harris's hesitation made more sense now. That evening, I sat on the porch while Timothy played with toy cars at my feet. Peter sat beside me, elbows on his knees. I've been thinking, he said. If Victor's reach is as wide as it feels, then you're not just fighting him. You're fighting the silence of everyone who looks the other way. I hugged my arms around myself. How do I fight that? He looked at me, eyes steady. By not letting them scare you quiet. As if on cue, headlights slowed in front of the house. A dark SUV, idling for a few seconds too long. The windows were tinted, impossible to see inside. Then it drove off. My stomach twisted. Was it Victor himself? Or someone else, making it clear they were watching? The answer came the next day when I tried to buy fabric supplies. The owner, Mr. Reynolds, wouldn't meet my eye as he rang up the order. Sorry, Lois, he said flatly, sliding my money back across the counter. We can't do business right now. Why not? I asked, though I already knew. He shifted uncomfortably. Orders. You understand. My cheeks burned. Orders, from Victor. When I told Anna, she exploded. This is how it starts. He isolates you. Cuts off resources. Next thing, you're on your knees begging for scraps he controls. I wanted to scream. To run. To tear up every Polaroid and spool of thread and throw them into the wind. But I couldn't. Not with Timothy's small hand slipping into mine, his wide eyes looking for safety. That night, Peter gathered us in the workshop. "We need allies," he said simply. "People who won't bow to him." "Who?" I asked bitterly. "Everyone's either scared or bought." "Not everyone," he said, voice firm. "Some folks are just waiting for someone else to stand first. Maybe that someone is you." The idea sounded impossible. Me? The woman who barely escaped her husband, who shook at the sound of a knock after dark. How could I be the one to draw a line against a man like Victor? But when I looked at Timothy, innocent, vulnerable, already dragged into a war he never asked for, I knew Peter was right. I couldn't win this by hiding. The next morning, I pinned Victor's Polaroid of the patrol car to the corkboard inside the workshop, right where every customer could see it. If Victor wanted silence, he was going to get the opposite. And as the first whispers rose among the few brave enough to step inside, I realized something. For the first time, Victor's shadow wasn't the only one filling the room. When I pinned that Polaroid to the corkboard, my hands shook so badly I thought the tack would snap in half. I half expected someone to tear it down the moment they walked in, but no one did. In fact, when Mrs. Fletcher, the retired schoolteacher, came in later that morning, her eyes landed on the photo. She froze. For a moment, I thought she'd leave without saying a word. But instead, she reached out and brushed her fingertips across the paper. "That man," she whispered, almost to herself. "He thinks he's untouchable." I didn't know what to say. But then she met my gaze, something fierce in her expression. "Good for you, Lois. It's about time someone stopped pretending." The words startled me more than the threats ever had. Someone wasn't turning away. Someone was choosing to stand closer. By the end of the week, a few more people had noticed the Polaroid, and the whispers began to shift. Yes, some still avoided me, but others lingered a little longer at the counter, asking gentle questions, their eyes darting toward the picture like it held answers they'd been too afraid to seek. Peter called it the first crack in the mask. But with cracks came backlash. 2 nights later, I found the workshop door spray-painted in thick black letters, "Keep quiet." Timothy saw it before I could cover it. His face went pale, and he pressed himself into my side. "Mom, what if he hurts you?" I knelt down, cupping his face in my hands. "He won't, baby. I promise." It was a lie. One I had to tell, for him, and maybe for myself too. Anna stormed in, took one look at the paint, and declared, "We're cleaning it up and then we're doubling down." Her certainty gave me strength I didn't know I had. We scrubbed until the words faded, though faint shadows still stained the wood. Maybe that was fitting. Maybe it was a reminder. Later, Peter showed up with supplies. New locks, stronger bolts, even motion lights. He worked in silence until Timothy finally asked, "Mr. Peter, are you scared?" Peter paused, looked at him, then said softly, "Of course I am. But fear's not what matters. What matters is what we do with it." Those words sank into me deeper than I wanted to admit. The next morning, Detective Harris came by. He glanced at the faint paint stains, then at the Polaroid still pinned to the board. His jaw tightened. "You need to be careful," he warned. "I am careful," I shot back. Careful is what let him get this far. "I'm done hiding." Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or worry. But he didn't argue. As the days passed, the workshop began to feel different. It wasn't just a place for stitching fabric anymore. It was becoming a gathering point. People dropped by not just for business, but to check in, to quietly show solidarity. One afternoon, a farmer I barely knew pressed a note into my hand before slipping out the door. In blocky handwriting, it read, "Asterisk, he owes me too. You're not alone, asterisk." I held on to that note like it was a shield, but Victor wasn't blind. If the cracks in his mask were showing, he was determined to seal them with fear. The proof came one night when I returned home from the workshop. On the porch sat a neatly folded piece of fabric, bright, patterned cloth from my store. Only it wasn't a scrap. It was a dress, one I had made weeks earlier for Mrs. Fletcher, and it had been slashed to ribbons. Pinned to the shredded fabric was another Polaroid. This time, not of Timothy, not of the patrol car. It was of me, taken through the workshop window.